Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of the Cover 2 podcast. I'm Jared Smith.
And I'm Nenad.
It's been a couple weeks, guys. We've been very busy. We haven't been able to record, but we're back, and we're back just in the nick of time. We're right in the thick of it with the NBA playoffs. We're in the second round. We've actually got a game live right now as we speak. We're recording on Tuesday evening. We've got the Bucks and the Nets going on. So excuse us if we happen to look down at our computers. One of us, Nick, might actually be watching this live on his YouTube channel right now. So if you see kind of eyes going back and forth, you know that he's not fully listening to me and he's actually watching the game, but it's okay. I'm going to let that slide a little bit. We're going to get into that game a little bit later. We're going to talk about some of the other series. We're going to start with the Phoenix Suns, who were the first team to advance to the conference finals. A little later in the show, we're going to get into Major League Baseball and some controversies going on with some foreign substances, some sticky situations, if you will, and a current player who is now injured and blaming Major League Baseball for his injury. So we will definitely get into that a little bit later on. I know Nick is dying to talk about that. But, Nick, we got to start with the NBA playoffs. And who better to start with than the Phoenix Suns, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we knew that they were going to be a good team this year, coming off of the bubble last year where they went 8-0 undefeated and literally carried that momentum all through this season into the playoffs, beat the Lakers, which not many people thought, including myself as a Lakers fan, and literally beat the brakes off of the Denver Nuggets, who were who were a top seed as well. So, Nick, I mean, your initial thoughts on the Phoenix Suns. How good is this team? And do they have a legitimate chance?
Not yet. Again, I just outlined. They had an injured LeBron, they had an injured AD who didn't even play 2 of the games, and they were able to win 6. And then they did not have to face Jamal Murray, and Nikola Jokic did not play like the NBA MVP, and they ended up sweeping him. Did I think it'd be a sweep? No, but the Suns should have won that second series once they beat the Lakers. So they're going to face a legitimate team in the Western Conference Finals in the Clippers or the Jazz. I think those 2 teams are the best team in the West. I predicted in our last show that I thought, you put a gun to my head, I think it's Clippers and Bucks in the finals. So the Clippers are doing their job right now, staying in the playoffs, and so are the Bucks. So, I'm still going to stick with the Clippers, and I think the Jazz is the second best team, being the number 1 seed in the West. And the Suns, obviously third right now. When they're healthy, they are a very formidable team, but I do not trust Devin Booker yet. I do not trust DeAndre Ayton. They do not have enough experience in the playoffs. Do I enjoy this Suns run because they have a full crowd and all that stuff, and they haven't been in the playoffs for a while? Yes, but again, I don't think they've faced pure playoff competition yet. And so I got to see that next series. If they get to the finals, I'll take them seriously. I know that's kind of ridiculous to say, but I think they almost need to get to the finals to become legitimate.
I hear what you mean, and I can't really disagree with anything that you said. Here's the number one thing that comes to my mind when I think of this Phoenix Suns team in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. It's their fans. Like, their fans have been unreal, and I get it. Like, there's been other teams in other arenas, like Staples Center, for instance, where the Lakers and the Clippers didn't necessarily have full capacity crowds.
Yeah.
They probably had, like, 8,000 or maybe 10,000, which is a decent amount for, obviously nothing from coming out of COVID. But still, like with the Clippers games, you see they still have cardboard cutouts, right? So, and you have, actual fans sprinkled in throughout the arena, at least on the side where they are showing the game, where they're filming. So the Phoenix Suns crowd is at full capacity. It feels like there's 50,000 fans in there.
Yeah.
And they are feeding off so much energy to that team that it's almost like impossible to go into that arena and beat that Phoenix Suns team, right? They're just, I think Chris Paul is probably having the best year of his career. And, like, finally, right? I mean, how many times, whether Chris Paul was with New Orleans or with Lob City and the Clippers, did we say, okay, Chris Paul is an all-star, he's a great player, all that stuff, but he can't get his team over the hump. And finally, it seems like he has a good match, good cohesiveness, a good young running team, and they're able to play to his strengths and to his styles. So it's the Phoenix Suns and that fan base that that is bringing all the energy in the world. And then Chris Paul, who, I think as of right now is probably the playoff MVP, like hands down. Not that they give out, I think as of right now is probably the playoff MVP, like hands down. Not that they give out a playoff MVP after 2 rounds, but if they did, it would go to Chris Paul, no doubt. Devin Booker is coming out and saying, yeah, I'm here. And I know a lot of people that know basketball know who Devin Booker is, but I think because he plays in a smaller market in Phoenix, he sometimes doesn't get the recognition that he deserves, right? If he was in LA, in New York, in a bigger market, Devin Booker would be just as big as Kevin Durant, Giannis, you know what I mean? Like, Devin Booker is for real. And he came out and he showed against the Lakers specifically, especially in that closeout game, why this dude is for real. So, I think just nothing but hats off to this team. And I don't see the way that they're playing how they don't make it to the finals. Like, I'm not saying that it's going to be easy. I don't think they're going to sweep the Jazz or the Clippers like they did the Nuggets. But if the Suns continue to play with that same cohesiveness and get good play from Jamison Crowder and Bridges and even DeAndre Ayton, who has averaged a double-double in this postseason, if they continue to get that from those role players, along with Devin Booker and Chris Paul being the superstars that they are, I simply don't see how this team doesn't make it to the finals.
Well, Jay, I'll tell you how. The reason why CP3 has never gotten to the finals, and that's because he's often injured in some of the biggest games and some of the biggest series. And so Chris Paul needs to stay healthy. Jay, we know if the Lakers are healthy, the Lakers win that series. Okay, the Lakers win that series. Because they weren't, the Suns won. They took advantage and then embarrassed the Lakers the last 2 games. And that's what you should do. And then they embarrassed the Nuggets. But again, the best player on this team, the biggest leader on this team is Chris Paul. And if he's not there, this team is done. And they're not going to win many games in the playoffs. And they're not going to win many quarters in the playoffs if they don't have Chris Paul. Now, if they do have Chris Paul, again, DeAndre Ayton has been playing some of the best basketball of his career. Very impressive. Devin Booker, playing like the all-star we expected him to, playing like he did last year in the bubble. But again, a lot of other players on this team have been playing perfect too. Jay Crowder has been playing out of his mind, right? We don't know where this is coming from.
When did this guy become a sharpshooter?
Yeah, well, Jared, will that really continue, right? And will Cameron Payne be able to play like he has? I don't trust this bench as much as I do the Clippers and Jazz's bench. And the other thing about the Suns, too, that I don't trust besides health and the fact that their bench isn't as good is their defense. I don't think their defense is on par with the Clippers or Jazz either. I mean, the Clippers have been putting on a defensive clinic in some of these playoff games that they've won. And when they've lost, they haven't put on a playoff clinic. So it's a little surprising with the Clippers there that they don't turn that on every single game. The Jazz, on the other hand, you have Bogdanovich or Bojanovic or whatever his name is. I mix up the two. He stopped Kawhi Leonard. Where did that guy come from, right? But when these teams' mentality of defense gets in other guys' heads that maybe aren't the best defensive players, these teams end up winning games that they should. They end up winning the big games, and I think that's what the Jazz and the Clippers are doing right now. The Suns, like I said, they haven't faced the competition yet. When they play defenses like the Jazz and Clippers, is it going to be tough? And either of those teams playing them, again, I got to give the nod to the Jazz or the Clippers just because of defense, bench, and overall depth and health too. I know Mike Conley's out, but that Jazz team is still loaded even without Mike Conley. So, the Suns are a great team, but it's a wait and see. There's no way I disagree with you, Jared. I don't think there's an easy way to get to the finals. I think there's a lot of factors here that have to go right for them.
I'll say this. You know what? Here's the thing. I'm going to disagree with you, and I'm not trying to throw any disrespect or anything towards the Jazz or the Clippers because I think they've deserved to get to where they are now.
Yeah.
I'll say this about Phoenix, right? It's great that they obviously beat the Lakers and that they swept the Nuggets, but they're going to have a decent amount of time off, and the rhythm that they've been playing in has been so great. I'm curious that whenever they do play, whenever this Jazz and Clippers series ends, how many days will they have had off? Will they be able to immediately game one pick up that momentum and come out guns blazing, right? Or are they going to be a little rusty, a little lethargic? Because obviously it's I believe it's what 2-1 or is it 2-2 in the Clippers and Jazz?
2-2, yeah.
2-2, right? So that's a big series. It's at least going 6. That's at least going 2 more games, which is in a sense at least 5 more days because you'll have a game tomorrow,
yeah,
and then a day off and travel.
That's a lot of time.
A game again,
a lot of time,
and then at least 1 day off. So that's 4 or 5 days before the Phoenix Suns play. And yes, the Jazz or the Clippers will maybe be a little bit tired coming off of a grueling series, but at least those guys are going to be in rhythm, right? The Suns are just out here practicing. And yeah, they're professionals, and we should say, oh, they should just be able to get back and go. But it's like there is such a thing as momentum and losing momentum. And so I think, to me, that would be the bigger issue for the Suns, especially being a young team and only having a few players on that team who have ever played in the playoffs, right? This is the first playoff time, the first playoffs for Devin Booker, for DeAndre Ayton, for Miles Bridges, right? Jay Crowder and Chris Paul have played in the playoffs, but not many other players on this team have. And so to have that layoff, how are they going to respond, right? Physically and mentally. And so I think that more than the actual Jazz or Clippers could potentially hinder this Phoenix Suns team, at least in game 1, right? And obviously winning game 1 is huge. And if you lose game 1, you're already behind the 8 ball. And so that to me would be a bigger factor more than the other team, the opponent that they would face.
Yeah, one of the other things too, Jared, we're talking about the Suns fans, man. That Jazz crowd is brutal too. That's a full crowd to the max. I don't know if Phoenix is even full, but Utah is full. They don't care up there in Salt Lake City about COVID, apparently. So, again. Imagine this, Jared. They take 7-8 days off or whatever it's going to be, and then they have to go to Utah, right? I think they want the Clippers to win because at least they get to go to play Staples Center. And like you said, it's only a half crowd, and it's not the Clippers' fault. They'd have a full crowd if the California would let them. And it'd be interesting, Jared, because today, June 15th, is technically reopening day in California. They pulled off restrictions. The Dodgers have 56,000 people at their game now. It's all outdoor sports. And they announced UCLA and USC would have full crowds and all that stuff, but those are outdoor. So maybe Eric Garcetti, the governor or the mayor of LA, gets a little bit more lenient, allows more fans. Let's get over 10,000 in the Staples Center. We got to help out the Clippers a little bit because it's just not fair that they only get to play with 8,000 people when the COVID rates here in California are better than a lot of other states, the ones that have the full crowds in Arizona and Utah. So, politically, let's go. Let's figure it out. It doesn't make much sense. But nonetheless, there's another factor too, Jared, who they play specifically. Will they go on the road? Will they stay at home? It won't be a far drive and it won't be a far flight. But nonetheless, one has the full crowd, one doesn't. And one is historical choker and the other one is not. So, we'll see. It's very, very interesting. Jared, one last point on the Suns. We have something on the line in this series that might be bigger than anything we just talked about, and that is the Kardashian curse. Okay, Devin Booker is currently going out with Kendall Jenner, and he is succeeding like no other Kardashian basketball player ever has.
That's true. Yeah.
Okay, so are we really saying, Jared? Are you really saying that you think a Kardashian is going to win an NBA championship? I don't know about that, man. I don't know. I don't know. Is Devin Booker?
I didn't think about that.
Hey, he starts play. He plays the Clippers, and he has to go to LA for Game 3 and Game 4. Who do you think he's seeing? You think he's practicing with his team all day? No, I think he's going to see his girl.
Listen, and this just goes to my point. He's had 5-6 days off, and he's probably going to have another 5 days off.
I know, man.
He's probably been with Kendall. I'm sure he's practicing, but it's like he's getting some quality time. I'm in with Kendall, right?
He's getting that
might
curse.
Not be fully invested.
He's getting that curse sprinkled on him day by day, and Chris Paul's got to pull him back, man. He's got to pull him back. It's a young team.
A little bit.
Got a young team that all think she's attractive, and there was their crushes when they were younger. So it's not good. All right, Jared,
I got to say this real quick, just for the viewers that are watching right now. Nick is not actually at the beach. Nick is not actually falling into the water. That is just his backdrop right now. So if you see his hand disappear and then reappear, that is just the cool background that he has put up for himself.
Yeah, this is where I'm emanating from. I'm emanating from Newport Beach out of my apartment now.
I think he's in the corner of his room. Yeah. Your girlfriend put you in the corner.
Jared breaking the fourth wall. unnecessarily on the podcast. An unnecessary shot by Jared Smith. So
yeah.
Let's move on.
It's been a couple
Jared,
weeks.
Jared,
I gotta get one in.
By the way, real quick, it's 101-98, 4 minutes to go in the Bucks-Nets game. Durant, 43 points, 10 rebounds, 15 assists at this point in the game. Do you hear that, Jared? 43 points, 10 rebounds, 15 assists for KD.
We'll get to that in a minute. Let's get to the other series, Clippers.
So let's get back.
And,
so
Jazz,
we talked about Clippers and Jazz, and we don't need to talk about them versus the Suns. We already did that. So let's just talk about this series and who we think is going to win now. You have the Jazz win 2 close games in Utah. The first game went down the last shot, big block by the 3-time defensive player of the year, Rudy Gobert, on Marcus Morris. Second game, Clippers had a lead, I believe, a 12-point lead at one point. Maybe that was the first game, and they blew that and lost the second game as well. And then the last 2 games have been blowouts from the Clippers, and the Clippers have looked what they should be. And Marcus Morris is hitting shots, and Paul George and Kawhi are doing their thing. And so it's kind of tough, right, to judge this series. It's exactly what the Clippers did against Dallas. So if you're looking at it that way, the Clippers probably end up winning this series. And I was saying to a lot of people yesterday when I was watching the game, I was saying, I think if the Clippers lose, they're losing in 6. If they lost that game 4, they'll win game 5 in Utah, and then they won't have no momentum. I just can't see them losing this series now because of the way they played and because of the way Paul George and Kawhi are playing in this series. They're playing so, and overall in the playoffs, we can say all the stuff about Pandemic P and all that stuff, and I guess time will tell if there's a game 7 or something like that. But so far, Paul George, besides a few games here and there where a lot of other guys didn't play well, he's played like an all-star, like a superstar in this series. And that's a lot different from a lot of other playoffs since he left Indiana. So I think that's a big factor. Kawhi, when he wants to, plays out of his mind. He plays like a top 3 NBA player. And then you got guys like Marcus Morris, guys like, Ivica Zubac stepping up. I don't know why I'm forgetting all the Clippers players. I watch every single game. But,
you're a Clippers fan. You should know.
Yeah. I just think the Clippers' depth right now without Mike Conley in this series, I think the Jazz lost a lot of momentum. Plus, Mitchell's playing a little hurt. And I think the Clippers got this, Jared. I think they'll win game 5. I think they'll win game 6. I think this is over. Realistically, it will be tough. It'll be tough in Utah, but they'll find a way. They'll probably get out to a quick lead like they did yesterday, and that's a big factor because Mitchell's been amazing. But I want to get your take. I'm a little bit biased fan. Right, I watch the Clippers a lot. I see the good things in them more than I see the bad things. So I want to get your take on this, Jared. What has your take been on this series so far? And do you think the last 2 games mean the Clippers win the series?
So first of all, I don't want to take any credit away from the Clippers because the Clippers obviously going down 0-2, right, coming off of that grueling series in the first round. And then having to play against not only Utah, but that fan base that we already talked about, that was pretty daunting, right? Down 0-2 again, and then to come back home and dominate in games 3 and 4 like they did was pretty impressive. But here's the thing about Utah, and it's kind of frustrating. And in game 4, literally in the first half, the announcers were even saying this. And it was like, in the first half, Utah was literally just like bringing the ball up at a slow pace. Like they had no momentum. Utah is a kind of a young running gun team. Like they're not getting on the fast break at all. They're trying to just come up there, letting the Clippers set up their defense. The Clippers have one of the best defenses in all of the NBA, obviously with the Claw and Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, right? 2 great defenders. Patrick Beverly, the Morris brother, right? They have a great defense. And so to me, in the second half, Utah finally sped things up and finally got into a little bit more of a rhythm, but it was a little too late because they had already dug themselves such a big hole. And I get it. Donovan Mitchell's got that ankle injury. He's not 100%, but you know what? This is the playoffs. It's an ankle. Deal with the pain and get out there and do what you got to do, right? Tape it up. Do what you got to do.
Yeah.
I'm not going to use that as an excuse. To me, Utah just needs to play with more urgency. More like, this is the playoffs. This is not the regular season anymore, right? And we saw in the first round, they were playing lights out. And for some reason, in the last couple of games, they've just been like a little lethargic. I don't know if that's because Donovan Mitchell has not been able to take over the reins, right? But I just, to me, these last couple games specifically have been more about the Jazz's lack of inability to get a rhythm going, more so than the Clippers. But like I said, I'm not trying to take any credit away from the Clippers because they have done what they've supposed to do. They've played well. I'm just saying this is not the Utah Jazz team that we are accustomed to seeing. They were the number 1 seed for a reason. And these last couple of games, we have not seen that at all. So I'm curious to see, going back home, game 5, series tied, the crowd will be behind them. I want to see them come out to a fast start. I want to see freaking fast breaks, Donovan Mitchell or whoever's bringing the ball up, run and gun. I don't want to see this like slow-paced jog up the court, let the Clippers set their defense, because when that happens, the Jazz have not had an answer in the last couple games. So I'll be very curious to see how they come out. Like, you think the Clippers are going to come out with a hot start? If they do that, then you're right. I think the Jazz are doomed. The Jazz literally need to come out from the jump and run and gun and not let this set their defense and get momentum, because they use their defense and that momentum to lead into offensive scoring.
Well, yeah, Jared, I think they need Mike Conley back too, because
that's big. When you, I didn't even mention that.
You know, when I look at this team, the last 2 games, like when I analyze every single game, this is what I see. I see Mitchell dominating, but doing too much in every single game, doing a little too much, right? He scores 40 points, but he's still missing 6 extra shots, right? Gobert has offensively not been a factor. 0. Whatever Marcus Morris is doing, whatever Zubac's doing, whatever the defensive scheme for the Clippers is doing, it's working. Is he getting 20 rebounds? Yes, but who cares about that? You need points, not rebounds. Offensive rebounds are impressive, right? If it leads to points, but if Gobert's scoring 8 to 10 points a game, you're doomed. That's a role player essentially. Where on defensive end he's amazing, but you got to play offense. You know, Andre Roberson isn't winning anybody championships, right? Dennis Rodman by himself isn't winning anybody any championships. You need the other guys. And I only see Mitchell producing. Jordan Clarkson goes off, they win a game, right? Joe Ingles has been playing well, they win a game. You know, where the hell is Bogdanovich? Where'd he go? He was like the number 2 scorer on this team. He's not doing it right now. And so for the Jazz, they need more than just Mitchell. And I think one of those answers could be Mike Conley. I mean, already the Nets are playing better today with James Harden, their leader, their go-to passer. So, you know, it's one of those things where I think the Jazz need Mike Conley back, and they need more production from everybody else besides Donovan Mitchell. Donovan Mitchell will not beat Kawhi, Paul George, Marcus Morris, Rajon Rondo, Patrick. You're not going to do it. I'm sorry. Ingles is going to slow down. Clarkson needs to step back up. Bogdanovich needs to step back up. And Gobert needs to be physical and man up and score some points, or this Jazz team's doomed. I already think they are. Like you said, Jared, if the Jazz get out to a big lead, that's different. But I think if the Clippers start blowing them out in Utah, they're going to get demoralized, and it's going to be over. It's going to be over. I think the Clippers caught all momentum, and this was the worst thing that could have happened to the Jazz, especially with Mitchell hurt.
More injuries, man. That's all I got to say. The injury factor has affected this NBA playoff so much, and I don't use that as an excuse, right? These are professional athletes. If you can suit up and play, you play. If you can't, you can't. But we can't use it as an excuse. But it has definitely played a major factor. Whether you want to talk about the Lakers, whether you want to talk about Utah, whether you want to talk about the Brooklyn Nets, who are obviously finishing their game right now. There's a minute left. We'll get into that in just a minute. The injury bug has caught the NBA as a whole by storm, and has greatly altered the way that some of these playoff games and playoff series have gone.
Well, I'll say this, Jared. I want to talk about this a little bit. We'll just wait to get to the East, because obviously we have this game to finish right here that we're both simultaneously watching. But, you know, with the injuries, yes, there seems to be a bit more this year, and maybe that has to do with the season starting earlier and all that stuff. But when you look back in history, and especially recent history, injuries have played such a big role in whoever ends up winning the championship or who gets to the championship that it's not really an excuse NBA fans should be making. I will go through a list right now, and there are some teams that didn't need help, and there are some teams that did. The Toronto Raptors don't win the championship if Klay Thompson doesn't get hurt. The Warriors win the championship if Klay Thompson doesn't get hurt. They do, right? The only reason the Raptors won is because Klay got hurt, right? Other years, Chris Paul getting hurt in Game 7 helped the Warriors get to the finals, right? I think that the Warriors do not win that championship that Game 7 if Chris Paul plays. I think the Rockets were bound for the finals that year. You look back, even the Lakers last year, they had who was it? It was Goran Dragic and somebody else on the Heat got hurt in the first few games. That series ended up going 6. You never know, right? So it happens a lot, and you know it happened with the Clippers way back in the day when they played the Rockets and they blew that series. Chris Paul got hurt his finger, all that stuff. It happens in the NBA, and it's not an excuse, but every team needs a little bit of help. How about Kyrie and Kevin Love getting hurt the year in the finals, right? So you see what I mean, Jared? Like, if you go back in the history of the NBA the last 7-8 years, there's so much history of injuries that it's kind of weird for people to be complaining about it, because it's like, it's going to happen to every team at some point, and it's going to help your team at some point. And it looks like, you know, the Clippers are the healthiest team right now. The Milwaukee Bucks are a pretty healthy team, right? The Nets were relatively healthy before Kyrie sprained his ankle, right? And so it's like, it goes back and forth. The Suns, they're healthy. We're saying they're one of the best teams, right? So it's like, you know, it's whoever stays healthy. That's part of the game, right? It happens in the NFL. Your quarterback gets hurt, you're done. You're done. Big time pitcher gets hurt in the MLB, you're done. You're done. It's sports. Goalie gets hurt in the NHL. It's tough, right? So, you know, injuries are part of the game. I just want people to know, go back, do your research, look at the history. Injuries have played a part in essentially every NBA Finals since the Warriors dynasty started. You can go back every single year and come up with something that happened in even the second round and the third round that made one team advance and domino affected the rest of the playoffs, or domino affected the NBA Finals themselves. So I just wanted to say that. I don't know if you want to give quick thoughts on that too. But it seems to me everybody needs help every year in the NBA, and the team that stays the healthiest wins.
Yeah, no, nothing to add, man. Let's go to the East. This Nets game is down to 30 seconds left. Nets are up by 2, but if we want, we can get into the Atlanta Sixers series and then let this game finish, and then we can get into the Brooklyn Nets series and see what ends up happening. Oh, it looks like 16
well,
seconds
here,
left.
Jared, let's just commentate this. Let's commentate what's going on here. So Durant just missed a big-time 3. The Bucks, Giannis just lost the ball. Giannis just choked with the ball, and now they have to foul, and Brooklyn's going to get 2 free throws with 15 seconds to go, and they're going to go into timeouts. They're going to go into timeouts and free throws. We can't start talking about the Hawks, but yeah, that was.
that was in his breadbasket. I mean, Middleton had a nice little dish, and Giannis, 10 times out of 10, 9 times out of 10, he gets that and he's going up, right? That should have been an and one. That should have been an and one.
Yeah, the pass was literally right into Giannis' hands, and he bobbled it out of nerves. And then the Nets got the ball, and now Durant's shooting free throws. So, Jared, let's move into, because the Milwaukee will call a timeout after these 2 free throws. Atlanta and Philadelphia. Yesterday, at the beginning of that game, I thought, this is Philly series. They're going to win in 5, everything. Then
they were up by like 20.
Jared, and then amazingly, the 76ers stars disappear. They turn into high school players, right? Kevin Durant just made it a 4-point game, so we're going to have multiple possessions that game too. It's looking like the Nets might win. Actually, they're not calling a timeout, and Giannis got fouled. Smart move. So getting back to the Hawks and 76ers, in the second half, Joel Embiid went 0 for 12. 0 for 12 from the field. Tobias Harris.
Not good.
Couldn't get rid of the ball faster in the biggest moments. And Ben Simmons disappeared. Jared, I think the 76ers will still win this series. I'm not really giving the Hawks a legitimate chance. Hey, maybe it will go 7, but I think 76ers have enough talent to win. But, man, am I not confident in the 76ers against either of these two teams we're watching live. I think last night showed that those guys aren't ready for the limelight, and I was not impressed by the 76ers, and good for the Hawks making it a 6-game series at least. But, I mean, I want to get your thoughts on the 76ers, because it was pathetic last night. And I think that showed exactly what the 76ers are all about. Not clutch.
Yeah, pathetic pathetic is the only word that should be used for the 76ers loss. Because, like, at one point, it was either 18 or 20 points that the Sixers were up, completely dominating, right? The crowd was out of it for Atlanta. It was Trae Young, the guy plays 40 minutes, 25 points, which is respectable. But, I mean, he shot 3 for 11 from 3, 8 for 26 overall, just did not have a good game. John Collins was the only dude that was really not, he only had 14 points, but like he had a couple putback dunks. I mean, he brought energy to that team, right? And
that
kind of was like, I don't care how many points we're down right now. We're staying in this, right? We're not getting down. If it's not for John Collins and just his effort, right, and his offensive rebounds and putbacks and that type of thing, I don't think the Hawks win, man. Like, I think the Sixers just literally blow them out. But his energy kept that team and that fan base in it, which then fed you're right. I mean, when you look at the scoreboard and when you look on paper, the Sixers have the better roster, right? Yeah. Now, Joel Embiid is definitely not 100%, and he's dealing with that knee injury. You could see he fell down multiple times in that game yesterday, and he was struggling to get up, right? Like, I mean, Atlanta, the amount of times that they had like a 5-on-4 break because Joel Embiid was trying to pick himself up off the floor, but yet Atlanta still couldn't convert on some of those. And so, to me, Joel Embiid, that dude just needs to get treatment after treatment after treatment for him to be on the floor and for it to be successful. I'm not confident in Philadelphia. Philadelphia should win this series. This really should not be that hard. Like, Atlanta's a great team to watch. They're fun to watch. It's cool. They got some cool jerseys. Their arena floor is really cool. It's good to see that fan base out. Good story. But Philadelphia should win this series. But after seeing what we just saw and how Atlanta beat Philadelphia in game 1, it's like, I don't think Atlanta's scared of this team.
No.
They're saying we're going to go back to Philadelphia for game 5, and we have just as much chance to win this game as anybody. So Philadelphia, I think, missed a big opportunity. If I'm Doc Rivers, I'm pretty disappointed in the team right now, right? Because I'm saying we had a chance to go up 3-1, close this series out, and see what happens with the Bucks and the Nets. And now we just put ourselves in a hole, and we guaranteed that they have to go back to Atlanta for at least the game 6. Yeah. So I would say I'm more disappointed in Philadelphia than anything. I still think they're going to win the series, but I am less confident in them, not getting to the next round, but competing in the next round, whether it's the Bucks or the Nets, and having a legitimate shot to get to the finals.
Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head. John Collins was out playing everybody on the field. Trae Young's made some big shots at the end. And 76ers didn't do anything. And again, this team's still relatively young. The 76ers, right? Tobias Harris is relatively young NBA player still. He's been around since he was 18, 19 years old in the NBA. And obviously Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, they're still young. They were on some really, really bad teams before they were on any good teams. And so, it's one of those things where the 76ers decided last night not to play hard in the second half, and it was pathetic. And that's not championship mentality. Maybe they'll come out and they'll blow Atlanta out of the water, but unless they do that, man, it's going to be tough to beat what most likely will be the Nets, because they just won this game 5 as we were on our podcast. They're hitting free throws to go up by 6 right now. Choke City in Milwaukee. As far as Giannis and Middleton at the end of that game, Giannis missed a free throw and Middleton just bricked a 3. So the Nets will win that game. And we'll get to that series in a second. But yeah, Jared, it's just when you see a team outplay and out hustle another team too, that's embarrassing. We're not seeing that with the Suns. Right, we're not seeing that with the Clippers, the Jazz. We're not seeing that with the Nets, and we're not seeing that with Milwaukee, even though they keep choking away some of these games. The 76ers looks the weakest out of any of these top teams, and as of right now, unless they show me something in these next 2 games, show me a lot, I'm eliminating them from the playoffs here. I think this matchup right here we're watching is the matchup for the NBA Finals in the East.
Yeah, I'll say this really quick to wrap it up, because I unfortunately can't disagree with you. This is a debate podcast, but right now I can't really argue with you. I'll say this: if you're the 76ers, y'all better come out with energy and fire, because that Trae Young dude is a killer. Like, did you see what he did in New York?
Yeah.
Like literally in New York, right? Like he was egging on the fans. Like he wants to get booed. Like, he feeds it. So Trae Young has no problem going into Philadelphia and taking all the smoke, right? And so if you let this man go off, Trae Young can shoot it from just as far as Steph Curry and Damian Lillard, right? Like he is the I'm not saying he's the next coming of those two, but he's like a 1B to those guys in my opinion. Trae Young is legitimately on the map and a bona fide superstar. So if the Hawks are hanging around in this game 5, right, and it's a 3-4 point game, 1 possession game, something like that, in the final minutes, and Trae Young gets the ball, Atlanta's going to be in some trouble. Let me just say that Atlanta needs to come out and literally assert their dominance and make this a blowout. Because if this is a close game, I'm telling you right now, Trae Young's going to have something to say about it.
Damn right. Damn right. No. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in those next 2 games. Hey, man, I'm rooting for Atlanta, man. 76ers, they pissed me off last night, and I really don't want them to win anything now. Joel Embiid, for how cocky he is, to go 0 for 12, you deserve all the smoke you're going to get the next few days. And Ben Simmons still can't shoot, and he can't even shoot in warm-ups. He's bricking balls in warm-ups now. Tobias Harris couldn't get rid of the ball quicker last night. Nobody wanted to take the last shot. That's not a championship team. It's not a championship team. You know what is a championship team, Jared? The Brooklyn Nets. Because Kevin Durant just went 48 minutes for 49 points and 17 and 10. Harden had like 6 points in this game. Okay? When we're looking at this series, Jared, now that we literally just watched Game 5, what do we think? What are our thoughts right now on this series? It goes back to Milwaukee, but I'll give you the first crack on this. Do you think Milwaukee has a chance with Harden back playing on the floor with Durant? Do you think the Bucks, it's done? Or do you think because they're going back home, they'll have a chance?
No, they have a chance. They were literally in this game up until the last couple of minutes, and when they literally choked, like you mentioned, Giannis misses a free throw, Middleton misses a 3, bricks it completely. Harden, I give Harden all the credit in the world, right? He is obviously not 100%, but he was like, listen, Kyrie's down, right? So we don't have our triple threat anymore. I need to suck it up with his hamstring injury and come out and do my best. The fact that he played 46 minutes with a hamstring, to me, is unreal because this isn't just an ankle injury where you're like, all right, I can just deal with the pain tolerance. Like a hamstring, I mean, you sprint down the court wrong and you tear your hamstring or you injure it even more, and you're not only out for this series against the Bucks, but you're probably out for the rest of the playoffs.
Yeah.
So I think he took a real gamble because as of this morning, when I woke up this morning, James Harden was out of this game. Yeah. And as the day went on, it was like 11 o'clock or noon, and it was like, update, James Harden is now questionable. And I was like, what? Like, the dude went from being out completely to questionable. So I don't know what treatment he got, but whatever it is, he needs to get that same thing before game 5. So no, I think Milwaukee is definitely still in this clearly. As long as Kyrie Irving is still injured and he's not able to come back and play, Milwaukee will still be in this series. But Kevin Durant, I think, just, basically told everyone, that was watching, that's a basketball fan, that, hey, I'm still the Kevin Durant of old. Like, I am still one of, if not the best players in the NBA, right? Like you mentioned, 48 minutes, 49 points, 4 for 9 from 3, 16 for 23 from field goals. That's some good efficiency right there. 16 free throw attempts. He made 13 of those. So Kevin Durant is officially back, right? I know we haven't really talked about his injury for a while, but this game with no Kyrie Irving, with a hobble James Harden who plays 46 minutes and only scores 5 points, that to me is unreal in itself. Kevin Durant came out and said, I'm still the best player in the NBA. Y'all might have forgotten. I just let y'all know tonight.
Well, Jared, and here's the other thing too. I don't know if you've heard these rumblings. There is an underlying competition, at least in Kevin Durant's head, against Giannis. He does not like being compared to the Greek Freak, and he wants to beat him. And so far, what we've seen in this series is when Durant wants to win, he wins, and when Giannis wants to win, it doesn't matter because Durant still wants to win. And we saw tonight in the biggest moment of the game, Kevin Durant has the ball. He's making shots. He's getting to the free throw line. And what is Giannis doing? He's missing free throws. He's bobbling the ball in the biggest moment of the game and losing the game for his team. Kevin Durant, arguably the best player in the NBA right now. And like you said, with the depth on this team And even with Harden on the floor a little bit, it creates enough of a competition to where it's going to be tough to beat this Nets team. And Jared, I'll say this: if you're the Nets, you got to win Game 6 because you don't want to go back to Game 7 because you never know how Harden will feel. And if the Bucks just get hot and you got nobody playing, when Durant played by himself, it was not good. The Bucks looked really good against the Nets. Okay, and like we just said, like I'm saying with Donovan Mitchell and the Jazz, you can't win with one guy. Literally, Durant, he almost went off for 50 tonight, and he almost did it, but he did have help. He did have Harden to scare defenders away from him. But I think the Nets need to win this next game because you have the 1 day advantage over the winner of the 76ers and Atlanta series if it goes 6, and then if it goes 7. You have multiple days off. It gives a better chance for Harden to get healthy. It gives a better chance for Kyrie to be healthy without worrying about games and all that stuff. So I think if you're the Nets, you really want to act like this next game is Game 7 because anything can happen in a Game 7. And just because you're the Nets and just because you got Kevin Durant does not mean you're going to win Game 7. Anything can happen. Anybody can get hurt. We've seen it in even my examples of guys getting hurt and all that stuff. In other series and other NBA finals, it can't happen. So the Nets need to win this next game. But Jared, what needs to happen for the Bucks to win this series? What do they need to do besides hoping the guys get hurt for the Nets? What do the Bucks need to do to win?
Yeah, no, that's okay. They need to hope that Kyrie Irving does not come back for the series. And
besides that,
that's probably one of the only things that they really can do because we already laid it out. Right? If Kyrie Irving and James Harden are on the floor with Kevin Durant, the Nets are not losing this series. It's just that plain and simple, right? Giannis is a great player. Won the MVP the last 2 years. Obviously, Jokic won it this year. But they're a good team. But they do not have the firepower to beat this Nets team. It is that simple, right? We saw it tonight. James Harden, 5 points. You can't beat the Nets when James Harden scores 5 points. I don't care if Kevin Durant scores 60, 70, 80 points. James Harden played 46 minutes and only scored 5 points, and the Nets still won. That is the whole telling story for me right there. Like, James Harden, to me, if you just took away the point score and I saw that James Harden played 46 minutes, I would expect James Harden to have 40 points. Like, with Kevin Durant having 49. The fact that he only had 5 and the Nets still won this game, that tells me that the Bucks they don't have it, man. This was an opportunity for them to take advantage of not only Kyrie Irving out, but James Harden limping for 46 minutes basically and not being able to be the aggressive scorer that he is. And then Nets still win the game. Jeff Green coming off the bench, 35 minutes, 27 points. That was huge because the only other bench player for the Nets was Shamet, who gave you 9, right? So it was literally it was Kevin Durant and Jeff Green who led the way for this team. So I just, if I'm the Bucks, man, I'm saying, what do you guys do?
Yeah.
What do you do?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. Let's talk about the Bucks because we're probably not going to have a podcast where we're going to be able to talk about the Bucks. We'll be talking about the Western and Eastern Conference Finals there next podcast. If the Bucks lose, and they lose in the second round and they lose in 6 or 7, where do they go? Do they need another superstar? Do they need to blow up the team? What do you do with Middleton, Drew Holiday? Like, what do you do if you're the Bucks with this team if they lose this series?
Well, listen, they just signed Giannis, right, to that massive extension. So he's not going anywhere. Chris Middleton, he's not going anywhere. They trade for Drew Holiday. I'm not exactly sure what his contract is like, but you're not trading for him just to have him for, 1 season or something like that and then let him go and test free agency or let him walk. So I think they need to bring in, it's got to be, I feel like they have good pieces. The problem is the Brooklyn Nets are just too good, right?
Yeah.
Like, take Brooklyn out of this series, or maybe Brooklyn doesn't have the 3-headed monster. Maybe James Harden isn't on this team and it's only Kyrie and Kevin Durant. Maybe the Bucks probably have a better chance. I think it's just a simple fact that they're one of the best teams in the East. Like, I think they could beat Philadelphia. I think they could easily beat Atlanta. But I think they just unfortunately ran into the Nets in the second round, at the wrong time as opposed to the conference finals. And they're just simply not good enough to beat them. Like they're right there. They're right at that cap. So I don't know what it is. I mean, they have 3-point shooting in Chris Middleton and PJ Tucker, who I think is a really nice piece. Another solid defender that can kind of take take the other team's best defender and take some of that pressure off of Giannis. So on paper, it looks like they have all the pieces. I think just like I said, this is just the simple fact that Brooklyn is better, and you got to take advantage of opportunities when they present themselves. And the Bucks simply did not do that tonight. Like, I'll say it again for the last time. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse. No Kyrie Irving, James Harden, 46 minutes, 5 points. It's unacceptable that the Bucks walked out of this game without a W with those stats. Can't happen.
Yeah. No, I know.
James Harden is not going back-to-back games with scoring 5 points. I can guarantee you that. I'll bet you money on that right now.
Yeah.
Like, James Harden is probably pissed off. Like, more power to him for gutting it out for 46 minutes. Dude is not going to show up on the stats again in Game 6 with just 5 points. Guaranteed. Yeah.
No, and Jared, you're right. When you look at this roster, they got Middleton, Giannis, and Jrue Holiday locked up until at least 23-24. And
that's your core.
It's $42 million for Giannis. It's $37 million for Chris Middleton. It's $32 million for Jrue Holiday. What's funny, Jared, is I don't think any of those guys are playing to that standard of money. I think Giannis is not improving enough every year. And Middleton and Holiday just don't play like guys that deserve $30 million. And I think that's the problem with this team is everybody is underperforming in a way. Is Giannis a potential MVP every year? Yes. But Jared, like we just watched, literally with our eyes, he dropped the biggest pass of the series. A wide open pass. He bobbled it because he was nervous, and then he missed a free throw that would have cut the lead to 2. That's not $50 million worth player. You don't pay a guy $50 million. You know who you pay $50 million? Anthony Davis and LeBron James, who won a championship last year. Kawhi Leonard, because he can single-handedly win a championship for you. Steph Curry should have been the MVP. Chris Paul, right? Giannis is not playing up to his money, and neither is Jrue Holiday and Chris Middleton. Jrue Holiday has been a disappointment in this series so far, and Middleton, every single playoffs, has been a disappointment in the few games where he misses shots and he just doesn't do enough overall in this basketball game. These guys just don't improve. And so I think that's the problem with the Bucks. They're locked in. I think you got to get another superstar. You got to get rid of either Middleton or Holiday. You got to figure it out. Do it like the Nets, right? I know the Nets roster is stacked, but before they did all that stuff, they essentially traded away their whole roster. And we're like, okay, we're going to go with Kyrie, Harden, and Durant, and I think we can win a championship even if everybody else sucks, right? So, why not go with Giannis and Damian Lillard or Giannis and somebody else, right? And you get another superstar on that team to help out the Greek Freak because every team needs a second guy. Even Michael Jordan needed a second guy. There's just not even a guy on this team right now. It's disappointing. And after looking at those contracts, they're screwed unless they get a superstar. They are screwed. Those guys don't deserve that money. All three of them.
Yeah, I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves here, and you threw out the name Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard is obviously a bona fide superstar, top 5 player in this league. I don't know if Lillard would want to go to Milwaukee because it's not a big market, and he's already in a small market in Portland's
not a big market either. He doesn't care. Come on.
Here's the name that I'd like to potentially see: Bradley Beal.
Ooh.
You pair Bradley Beal, and obviously Damian Lillard is a sniper as well, but so is Bradley Beal. Bradley Beal can put up 40 any night he wants. You pair Bradley Beal with Giannis. I think that's a pretty damn good duo that could do some damage and have more success against a team like the Nets than the current construction.
That's
all speculation. We don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves.
Of course.
Bradley Beal.
You need a closer. That's it. That's all this team needs. They need a closer, and Giannis isn't a closer. Middleton's not a closer, and Holiday's not a closer. Can't win a You can't win a championship without a closer. Can't even in baseball.
Bradley Beal, just come to LA. It's all good, man. Just come to the Lakers.
Stop it. The Lakers have legitimately. We're not gonna talk about this, but the Lakers have what I call the Durant excuse. They now can go get anybody, and they can be like, "We lost in the first round. We need help." I don't put it behind him to get Kawhi or Damian Lillard or Bradley Beal because they can now. They lost. They have an excuse. Lakers roster was far worse this year than it was last year. They need some help. Maybe a superstar can help. I don't know. We'll see. All right, Jared, let's switch topics real quickly on the end of this podcast. Baseball. A lot of interesting stuff happening, not on the field, but off the field. There's a big substance issue, and it's not substance abuse. It's not steroids. It's substances being used by pitchers at an unfair rate. It's hurting the game offensively. Statistics are down. There's rumors that the MLB messed with the ball before the season. Lots and lots of complaining and controversy, and Trevor Bauer and Mike Trout and Pete Alonso, and now we hear Tyler Glasnow, right? And so what's happening in the MLB, in layman's terms, right? There's so much to talk about. We don't have enough time on this podcast. We'll dive more into it if this gets bigger. But the MLB is cracking down on pitchers using any sort of substance with the ball. To help you guys out, if you're not baseball fans, baseball players, particularly pitchers and sometimes hitters, guys, they use stuff. Okay, they're not using steroids. They're not using pine tar or corked bats like they did back in the day. Well, pine tar they might be using, but they're not using the exaggerated things that potentially put you in prison, right? They're just using little things here and there, putting a little spit on the ball, cutting the ball a little bit. It's part of the game, right? It's like sign stealing, right? The Astros took it a little too far. Jared, the Astros took it a little too far, and now the sign stealing thing is a little taboo in the league, right? And that's for good. But sign stealing is okay. It's like the NFL. A defender start calling out plays before the play starts. That's fair. But if you didn't allow a defender to do that, then it would be more fair to the offense. So what's happening now is because they apparently deadened the balls, and because these pitchers are using substances and the hitters are complaining because they can't hit the ball, and guys are throwing 102. Now the MLB said, well, okay, we'll do something then. Guys get suspended, like 10 games if they have substances. So now all the pitchers are coming out and saying, MLB, you've known about this for 4 years. You allowed us to do this. You swept it under the rug. You said it's okay for us to use substances. Now in the middle of the season, you're going to take it away? Now we have Tyler Glasnow blaming his newly found Tommy John surgery on because he can't use substances. Jared Smith, I know you aren't a baseball guru, but after hearing all this nonsense, what do you think about this? Like, this is crazy. I'm surprised this doesn't get more coverage. This is a crazy story in sports.
My relationship with baseball is very up and down. I never played organized baseball, right? So I don't have that inside knowledge that you do, or Alex Silva, a friend of the podcast who comes on the show, or some other people do. So there's just some things that I just don't get, Nick. And listen, for this guy, Tyler Glasnow, to come out and blame his injury on the back cheat anymore. Listen, it's the first podcast in a couple weeks. All right. Yeah. I'm really happy right now. Nothing is going to damper that. So I'm going to control myself. But I would love to go off on this guy because to me, that is the most blasphemous thing I have ever heard. Not even anything that Ryan Johnson, another friend of the show, has ever said has been more blasphemous than what Tyler Glasnow just came out and sounded off on. Because you can't cheat and put substances on baseball to help you look better, you have now gotten this injury that is going to require you to have Tommy John surgery and keep you out for the rest of this season and probably the start of next season. That's what you're going to blame it on? Really? That's what you're going to blame it on? I listen, the old, it's just a part of baseball, or the unwritten rules, or all of that. I hate that, dude. That to me is, I don't want to hear any of that. And it's 2021. I don't want to hear about it's been a part of baseball for the last 50 years, or, it's an unwritten rule. BS, man. Like get with the times, right? If you study, like you mentioned, you brought up an example of football players and defenders and calling out plays, right? Now, if they study, right, and do their homework and research and watch film of the offense, and they just know in a certain formation a team is going to do this play, that's called film study.
Yeah.
Right? But when you are, filming a team and taking their signs or using something a substance to put on a baseball to make your ball be thrown harder or have a different angle on the pitch, yeah, that's cheating. And when you get caught, whether it's you as the player or Major League Baseball as a whole, all y'all look bad, right? Like this is bad for all of Major League Baseball, not just the players or just one party or another. This is bad for everyone, right? And the fact that, like, how long have we been talking about this now? Not us specifically, because we haven't talked about this on this podcast, but how long has this been out? Right, like Major League Baseball has supposedly known about this for 4 years, and this has been on SportsCenter and every major sports media outlet for the last, I don't know, couple weeks, a month, maybe even more. And has anything actually been done about it?
Well, Jared,
like active cheating is going on right now. What has happened? Jared, please inform me.
This is what pisses me off the most about this thing. You are right. The MLB knew about this for 4 years. 4 years, guys. Not 8, 4. They knew about the sign stealing with the Astros and Yankees. Or excuse me, the Astros and Red Sox for a few years. The MLB sucks, man. Robert Ranford needs to go. Jared, listen to the... Okay, so again, they've known about this, and although it's cheating, Jared... I think it's a little fair to wait until the offseason to change the rules, okay? So here's what they just decided, essentially because a couple hitters complained, right? These are the punishments, okay? I'm just going to start reading. This is an ESPN article done by Jeff Passan. Great writer. Give him credit. Pitchers will be responsible for foreign substances found on catchers and position players. A position player will not be ejected for possession of a foreign substance unless the umpire determines the player was applying it to the ball to aid a pitcher. Violators, pitchers, are subject to ejection, and decisions are not subject to replay review. Players who refuse to cooperate with the inspection are presumed guilty. Club employees who assist players in using or masking foreign substances or who refuse to cooperate, again, will be presumed guilty. Players suspended for violations will not be replaced on the active roster. That means teams have less players. They don't have 26, they got 25. Players can use rosin bags, which is always been a help for pitchers, like chalk for weightlifting or gymnastics, right? It's essentially the same thing. But you can't combine anything. The MLB is saying you can't even use sunscreen anymore, Jared, because guys are using the advantage of sunscreen to put stuff on the ball. Now, I think that's all fair, right? I'm not going to get burned out there and potentially get cancer 20 years down the road because the MLB doesn't want me to cheat, right? I'm going to put my sunscreen on. If a little bit of it gets on the ball, fair use, right? I don't think that's what the MLB is talking about here. But, Jared, this seems extremely, like, to the point, or not to the point, but it seems a bit excessive for the middle of the season when they knew what was going on, right? It's like the cops knowing that the mafia runs the bar locally down the street, but doesn't do anything for 4 years, and then all of a sudden just raids the place and they can't find anything, right? It seems a little hypocritical of the MLB to allow this to happen, allow pitchers to use foreign substances, juice the balls the last 2 years so hits go up, then they deaden the balls and they blame the pitchers. Right, like that. I think this is just as bad for the MLB, what they're doing, as it is for the players. The players thought it was okay. As much as we want to think it's cheating and how bad it sounds, they thought it was okay. So I think it's fair that you say, okay, don't do it this year. We're going to review this at the end of the season. If we have more violators, you warn them. You say, if we keep seeing this, we will suspend them. But all they did was, a couple of hitters complained. All right, pitchers are done. We need more home runs. Ratings are down, right? It seems ridiculous, right? In that sense, can you at least blame the MLB a little bit for the way they're handling this?
Oh, of course. I can't argue with much of you said. I blame Major League Baseball for a lot of things. I blame them for obviously letting these types of things slide, right? And then of course it's like, oh my gosh, it somehow comes up 3-4 years later, and it's like, Major League Baseball, where were you guys? Yeah. Your ratings have been, you want to know why? Because the sport is not fun to watch unless you are at the game. right? I'm sorry, but watching Major League Baseball on TV, a 1-0 game or a 2-0 game is like watching paint dry. It's not fun. Like you're not allowed to really. I mean, I guess you are, but it's like you hit a home run and you can't celebrate too much because then the pitcher is going to get his feelings hurt, and then the next time the batter comes up to bat, the pitcher's going to hit him, right? It's like I just the game has not to me evolved like other sports have, like football has, like basketball has, like hockey has, right? To where it's fun, right? I think you want to always have the younger generations getting involved early, not just playing themselves, but watching the professional leagues, right? And it's like, to me, I didn't play baseball growing up. And so, yeah, I like going to Angels games or Dodgers games or Padres games. But am I going to sit here and watch baseball every night on ESPN? Hell no. Like, I don't care if it's a 1-0 game or an 11-10 game. Like, it's just, to me, baseball has not, it has not garnered my attention. It has not made me want to watch on an everyday basis, right? And so I know I kind of went off the beaten path a little bit
you're fine.
Talking about this substance abuse and everything, but it's just Major League Baseball has a lot of issues on its hands right now. Number one, the fact that they don't nip things in the bud and they don't take things in a proactive sense. They let things slide by, and then all of a sudden, a couple years later, oh yeah, we knew about that. Now we're going to do something, right? I don't understand what they are trying to do as an organization on multiple levels. And I mean, yeah, I don't think baseball is ever going anywhere. It's not going to ever go away. But the publicity of it, the star, fantastic stars in baseball. I don't think that they get the recognition. They're not in like commercials like you see NFL athletes and NBA athletes as much, in my opinion. I just think there are a lot of things that Major League Baseball could do to uplift its players and uplift the game as a whole. Because right now, it is on the very bottom of my list as far as coming home after work and wanting to sit down and have dinner and watch a baseball game.
Yeah. No, Jared, I'll say this too, man. You make a great point because a lot of that has to do with the handling of this issue. Like, if you're going to juice the balls, allow the players to celebrate. Okay? If Ronald Acuna Jr. wants to hit a ball 480 feet, he should be able to celebrate because that is an incredibly difficult thing to do. Right, Jared? Can we do that? No. Can most of the players in the MLB do that? No. Fernando Tatis, let him celebrate. Mike Trout, let him celebrate. Mookie Betts, let him celebrate. Doesn't matter the race. Doesn't matter anything like that. Let the players be themselves. Let them do however they want. The MLB manipulates it so much that you can't ever have. They're trying to create a middle ground when we want to see stars. If there's a pitcher that's unbelievably dominant like Jacob deGrom, let that guy talk crap. Let him do whatever he wants. If there's a guy that hits 60 home runs, let him flip his bat every time and tell every pitcher that he sucks, right? Like they do in the NBA and they do in the NFL. For me, Jared, too, I think the NBA has gotten a little bit more boring the last few years because of the three-point shooting, the lack of defense. But you know what? You know what brings me back is the star power, right? Oh, well, Steph Curry is the model of the thing I don't like in the NBA, but man, is that dude entertaining because they market him well, right? Kevin Durant, marketable, right? Kawhi Leonard, even as boring as he is, he's still marketable. He's doing commercials, right? LeBron James, don't even get me started. Space Jam this summer, right? Changed his number, right? Kyrie Irving, as ridiculous as things he says, they still let him say what he wants to say, right? It's fair. The MLB manipulates their players too much, and not only is it hurting them, in the star power range, but now it's literally hurting the game itself because you're manipulating the balls, and then you tell the players they can't manipulate the balls because you did, and you're making it too hard, and it's stupid, Jared. It's like we're arguing with like kids on the playground, like in middle school, like, okay, well, I flattened the ball because I wanted to kick the ball further, and then you flattened the ball more, so it's your fault. No, bro, that's not the way it works. Like, both guys did it, and let the first guy do it, and then try to. I don't know. It's really. I'm going on a tangent. We need to end the podcast, but yeah, Jared, we'll continue on this, and if we hear some more news or there tends to be some big suspensions, some big time guys, we'll revisit this issue. I would love to talk about Alex on the podcast about this too, because I think this is a crazy issue, and It's just very, very interesting. But yeah, so for this podcast, we are done. We will be back next week talking Western Eastern Conference Finals. Jared will probably likely wait till those series are over, like we did with this one, and we'll try to be like we were tonight, where we're at least at this point right now when we're recording and when we release, we will know what has happened in the net series, and the two other series we discussed, and they're 2-2. So there is a new 3-game series. So we'll try to get those games before game 1, at worst before game 2. But yeah, that's what we'll be talking about next week, along with any other big time sports news like we have with baseball. But for this podcast, like I said, we are done. I am Nick Nenad.
And I'm Jared Smith.
And we'll see you next week, guys.
Peace.